Another great show for you tonight. Plenty of reaction to the Super Bowl. We've got Knicks and Nets in action against each other tonight. We'll talk about it in the second half. Chris Caputo joins us later on in the show to bring us up to speed on the Major League Baseball lockout. Johnny Sticks with some hockey in just a little while. Before we get to any of that, let me say hi to my co-host, the coach, Mike Adone.
Trez, great to see you. As always, you mentioned Super Bowl, hockey, everything else. I don't want to, once again, rub in my prediction, but I do have one winning jersey behind me at the moment, although we're going to stick with my Islanders. But yes, Rams pulled it out. Great game. Not exactly a classic, but definitely a classic finish. Lots of stuff to get to. Yes, baseball, which we'll hit towards the end. Knicks and Nets, which are going on right now. We'll give you a little. It was 22-11 midway through the first quarter. Knicks out in front. Just once again, tons of stuff to get to. Can't wait.
Yeah, so let's start with the Super Bowl, Mike. Actually, 23-20 final. So, let me pat myself on the back here. I was actually much closer to predicting the final score and the winner.
Yes, sir.
I think I said 24-23, did I?
You were in that ballpark for sure.
Yeah, it was 23-20. You were expecting, I think, a little bit more in the way of a shootout. I think you were up in the 30s, but that type of game, Mike, not terribly entertaining for the casual fan, but for fans like you and me, I thought it was a really good game. What about you?
Absolutely. Anytime when you have a football game of any sort, but especially a Super Bowl, come down to the last minute, a game-winning drive, you have to be pleased. And yes, absolutely. If you're looking for a lot of scoring, maybe that's what I was thinking. Was I was kind of hopeful that the casual fan would be into this a little bit more, have something more to watch. But the game itself, was tremendous. Great defensive struggle, momentum swings back and forth that were very palpable. You had a little bit of everything. Unfortunately, some injuries, a little bit of drama with that. But yeah, if you were into football and really paying attention and had paid your mind throughout the season of the strengths and weaknesses of these teams, the Bengals showing up literally out of nowhere, Rams mortgaging the future to get into this game. You have to be pleased.
Yeah. And the thing is, Mike, is that, when you look at the way the game unfolded, there was a lot there to dig into. The fact that Beckham was playing very well early in the game and then got hurt. And after that, because the Rams had absolutely no running game whatsoever. I mean, look at their running game in this game, Mike. Cam Akers, 13 rushes for a total of 21 yards. Sony Michel. I mean, what happened to Sony Michel? He was a good player a couple years ago. 2 rushes. Are you ready for this? 2 yards.
I think Sony Michel was someone in the doghouse for the fumbles that he produced earlier. Which, listen, I probably would have given the guy a few more carries than 2 to try to get him going because, like you said, that running game was so inept. But when you take out a top receiver like Beckham, you can't run the ball. To ask them to score points against anybody is a monumental task.
Yeah. And by the way, folks, we want your comments tonight. So please comment us about football now. If you want to wait a little while, Joe Salamino says hello from the Hidden Bunker. Yeah, Joe, you're not going to like what I have to say about the Islanders later on, but I'll wait till we get Johnny Sticks on. Joe, good buddy of mine, good sports fan. So we thank him for tuning in and commenting us. Folks, if you want to comment about the Super Bowl, do so now. If you'd rather wait till we get Johnny on and talk some hockey with him, we can do that. Don't forget Caputo later on the MLB situation. So let's dig into this game, Mike. Beckham, 2 catches, 52 yards and a touchdown, all early. But of course, Cooper Kupp, as your friend, was it Steve that commented us last week?
Yes, absolutely. Good memory, Mike. Yes, Steve.
Steve commented us. He said Cooper Kupp was going to be the MVP of this game. I mean, listen, he didn't exactly go out on a limb with that. But, I mean, good prediction by Steve. Cooper Kupp, 8 catches, 92 yards, 2 touchdowns. Also, Mike, importantly, 1 rush for 7 yards for a big first down when the Rams, as you and I both mentioned, were completely unable to move the ball on the ground.
Absolutely. Yeah. They run that jet sweep there to him, which you have to be confident in that play on fourth down. When you need that yard, it just goes to show also they could not, rely on any running back to even get across or even a sneak at that point. Run the jet sweep with Cooper Kupp, gets first down and more. Big momentum right there. He short of kicking field goals and rushing the quarterback, he did everything for the Rams.
Yeah, and I mean, you look at that last drive, Mike, when everybody in that stadium, everybody on the Bengals, everybody sitting in that stadium, everybody watching on TV, millions of people knew that they had to go to Cooper Kupp. They had no place else to go. Now, this backup tight end came in and did a nice job. He had I thought I had it down on my sheet here somewhere. Oh, yeah.
But definitely made, the impact.
Bryson Hopkins, 4 catches, 47 yards. He was the only guy doing anything besides Kupp. Now, Kupp, everybody knew they had to go to him on that last series. He not only scored on that drive, Mike, he actually scored twice on that drive. I mean, if you recall that one play, they got it in the end zone. There was a penalty on the offense for holding, but there was also a penalty on the defense for helmet to helmet on Kupp after he caught that ball in the end zone, and Kupp characteristically still held on to that ball.
I was a little bit surprised too. If you looking back, I kind of replayed it later on. Kupp took quite a hit on that play. He looked a little foggy. You could tell he was hurt. Maybe in a normal circumstance, he goes to the sideline for an evaluation, but you would never know that anything happened, but I would say his bell was ringing pretty well. But then the game-winning catch, they talked about it later on after the game, how he was able to set that up. Normally, I believe Eli Apple was playing defense on him right there, our old friend from the Giants.
Yeah, why?
Good question. Remember Elvis Patterson toast back in the day? I was smelling burnt toast in that situation, burnt apples. But Kupp did something that only a couple of people picked up on. Obviously not me being a football guy, but I heard this. He normally does not run a fade in that situation, and actually set up for the inside run. Apple bit on it. Excuse the pun. He bit on it, and then he was able to run. So you could see Apple never had a chance on it to even turn and see what was going on. So Kupp, besides being tremendous, physically, he made the smartest play and great call right there by the LA offense.
Yeah, and the thing that occurred to me right at that time, Mike, and you and I, being Giant fans, know this. Did the Bengals not have anybody a little bit better to put on Cooper Kupp when everybody, as I said, knew that play was coming to him? You didn't have anybody better than Eli Apple, who was terrible when he was with the Giants and apparently is now still just as bad.
It's a great question, but how about maybe having some second help on that? You put 2 guys. Who else? You're not stacking the box. So maybe you have a little extra linebacker support there. I don't know. Yeah, it was, besides being a fantastic play, a little bit of a head scratcher on the defensive call by the Bengals. But yeah, once again, you got to give all credit for the throw and the catch, and to just be even that position from the get-go.
Let's talk about the Bengals for a few minutes, Mike. Joe Burrow, 22 for 33, a touchdown, no interceptions, played well in that game, sacked 7 times, which again, throughout this season, throughout this postseason, has been an issue for the Bengals. But when you look at it, the Bengals did not have nearly as much trouble getting their running game off the ground. Joe Mixon, 15 rushes for 72 yards, 4.8 a carry, plus a big touchdown pass from Joe Mixon.
Yeah, can you imagine if the Cincinnati Bengals had any kind of pass protection, how just scary they would be, and especially in that game. I saw this earlier. Joe Burrow's been sacked 70 times this year, including the playoffs. 7-0. Wow. The fact that you have 70 times throughout the regular season and playoffs. If you can even get a cab to the Super Bowl being sacked 70 times, and forget the fact you're in the game. Just amazing, and all credit to him. But yeah, they got the running game going early. Not that they got away from it, but they had to mix things up after a while. But you saw later on, maybe they were afraid to go to the pass a little bit because of Aaron Donald, and he obviously made his presence known throughout the game. And then on that last drive,
coming away from that game, Mike, does Burrow take a hit to you? Not necessarily for the way he played, but you brought it up on our last show. A couple of people have brought it up in the couple days since the Super Bowl. A lot of the sort of cocky, a little bit less mature kind of stuff. Does he take any hit to you in your mind?
I don't think he does, only because he had them in position to win the game. Also, it was relayed later on that he did have a slight MCL sprain, so he did play some of the game hurt. I think that you have to give him credit for that as well.
That happened very late in the game, though, too, Mike.
True. But you know what? You're still talking about a guy, as you mentioned, no interceptions, managed the game well, had them in position. I mean, he wasn't the second coming of Joe Montana. He wasn't the original Joe Cool out there, but he definitely. The AFC is tough because you're talking about Mahomes, and also you go up to Buffalo. And you look at the quarterback situation there. So the AFC is really chock full. But, did he embarrass himself? No. Did he add to the mystique or legacy of at this early age? I don't think so, but he definitely didn't embarrass himself.
Welcome to our new segment, folks, Coach's Corner, where we put Coach Mike Adone on the spot and we make him we ask him to very nicely analyze some of the big coaching moves in the game. So let's talk about Zach Taylor. Let's talk about Sean McVay. Any problems, Mike Adone, with anything either one of those gentlemen did strategically in terms of the Super Bowl game?
No, not really. I'll start with Sean McVay. I think his game plan, which he always has in front of him, and the card, and he's very OCD about keeping that card in front of him. What had originally been written on that, probably he could have maybe ripped it in half, because you're talking about, as you mentioned, no running game, losing Beckham, tight end situation is rough. He had to get super, super creative later on, play calling wise, to put that game, in the hands of his quarterback and his receivers. Matt Stafford, I thought he kept him out of trouble. He did have 2 interceptions. One was the one to the end zone, not a bad call there, although maybe he might have taken that on his own. Even they punt, they're basically getting the ball in the same spot. The second interception wasn't really his fault as well. I thought he did a nice game play calling to keep him out of trouble, and really got as creative as he could be later on. On the Bengals sideline, maybe a little bit too conservative later on, but there nothing to me that jumped out and said, hey, he looked overmatched for the moment. These are 2 guys that coached together, came from the same coaching tree. They look cool as the cucumbers out there. No sense of panic in any way. I mean, you could definitely, I think if you're familiar a little bit with McVay, you could see that, this was his time, because even though he's 35 years old, lost the Super Bowl earlier, they're all in this year. There's not much else they can do going forward. They got no first round picks for the next 7 years. So if you're going to win, this is the time to do it. And in your home stadium, even though they technically weren't the home team. So I'm sure inside he was feeling it, but he rose to the occasion. And just fast forwarding a little bit, but coach speak, does he come back? Interesting as well. And then we'll hit that on another time. But, my coaching brethren there, especially from the football side, I have nothing to say but good things.
Any issue with Zach Taylor going for it on 4th and short from his own 40? Now, this was very early in the game, Mike, and I thought of it at the time. I said, what is he doing? It's the first quarter of a scoreless game, and you're going for it on 4th and 1 from your 40. Do me a favor, please, folks. Let's not reinvent the game. Punt the football there.
Absolutely. I think you and everybody that was watching the game pretty much must have had the same exact thought. The only thing, Mike, that I can think of in that situation is, Admittedly, I haven't watched a lot of Cincinnati Bengals football this year, but that might be a situation where all season long they've gone for it, and he's saying, you know what? Yeah, it's the Super Bowl.
First quarter, Mike.
I know, but listen, it's the Super Bowl. We're going to stick to our plan and go. You got to give him credit. It's guts. I mean, it's not the safe play. So it might be a little bit too much. Reinvent. I don't know if he's trying to reinvent things or catch him off guard. I don't know. You can definitely speculate. Turned out okay. I'm not going to hate on him for it because it was a gutsy play. But I'm sure, all of Cincinnati and half of that stadium that was watching there was holding their collective breath, saying the same thing you did.
I thought it was silly, Mike. I thought it was a guy getting a little bit too hyped up and making showing a little bit of an experience by doing that early in the game. You want to do that in the fourth quarter? I have no issue. I have none. Yeah. But early in the game, 0-0 game, teams still feeling each other out. I'm going to punt that football. I'm going to make the Rams start on their 5 or 10 yard line. Quickly, before we get to Johnny, any issues with the officiating in that game? You heard a bit of this week coming off that game. The fact that the Zebras were very quiet for most of that game, yes. Mike. And then late in that game, they got very, very noisy for the last 3 or 4 plays of that game. Any issue with that to you?
Well, listen, as a basketball coach, it's kind of the polar opposite of what you normally see. Games called tight at the beginning, and then the officials are swallowing the whistle late in the game, letting the players decide. This had a tendency to kind of go the other direction. The calls late in the game were pretty obvious, at least on the pass interference calls. They did blow one, earlier in support of the Bengals. You talk face mask, long play. But yeah, I think any sports fan, all you want is consistency. Any coach, all you want is consistency. This game was certainly not officiated consistently. I don't think, the calls really, by being a little bit more aggressive as referees really made the outcome of the game the cause of their flags, but it certainly was so noticeable. And football officiating, it's incredibly tough. It is. But there are also times where you say, you got all these dudes on the field, how they miss certain things. And then, if you talk to anybody who knows anything about football, they can call a holding call on any play. I mean, literally on any level. Right. So some of those, late in the game, the conspiracy theories were out, that Roger Goodell was on the phone saying, let's go. No, I know. You can listen.
Stop that.
I'm just saying they come up. It's nonsense. It's nonsense. It's great fodder to talk about. But yeah, you could be frustrated.
I thought the only real bad moment they had was missing that very obvious call on T. Higgins on that long pass play where he threw. Not only did he throw Ramsey to the ground, he threw him down on the ground by his face mask. I mean, Mike, as an official, I'm sorry. This is the Super Bowl, dude. You cannot miss that. You can't miss that.
The sideline judge was behind it, but there was somebody right in front of it. So sometimes it's like, they don't want to overstep each other. But when your partner is blocked by the play itself, there's no way the guy could have seen it. Throw the flag. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, let's take a quick right turn and talk some hockey right now. And to help us do that is our intrepid hockey reporter, Johnny Sticks, John Santa Maria. John, how are you this evening?
Good evening, guys. How are you?
What's up, John?
Coming off a little bit of a tough loss the other night for the Islanders, John. But the thing I do hope is that the second that game was not even over, the second that empty netter went in to the Islanders net, that you quickly turned to the Ranger game, because the end of that Ranger game the other night, I thought was pretty wild.
Yes, they played a good game against the Bruins. Yeah, it was unfortunate that this was all last night as what happened first in Buffalo. It was a very tough loss, to say the least, and shows you more of the inconsistency with the Islanders this season. Just everything going wrong that could go wrong has gone wrong. I think that's the way we could summarize the 2021-2022 season for the Islanders.
So, John, how long is it from now before you, as Barry Trotz and as Lou Lamoriello and those folks, start to say, hey, guys, we have to sit down and finally admit this is not our year. When is that point, John?
That's a good question because the trading deadline is not for another month, March 21st. And that wasn't even pushed up because of the Olympics. So you essentially, if you're looking at trading pieces, you could say a month rental. Maybe teams will need them earlier. It depends on that. I think probably once March 1st hits, maybe teams will start to make the calls early about players because usually this is something that happens in early March, but I think they changed it this year because of the Olympics and all that. So not really going to go fair off that, but just looking into some things again earlier, there is going to be some value for some guys out there. So they have to see now what they could get for their impending free agents and take the best deal you could get. And it starts with Cal Clutterbuck. I just read online, there are some reporters out there who feel that he is worth a third-round pick. And if you could get that back for him on an expiring contract, and if they say tomorrow we'll do that, you might as well just do it.
John, Mike kind of stole my thunder a little bit, but you somewhat answered the question. But really, with the trade deadline being a month away, and it is not your normal season, how much longer can you wait until you really got to flush this down the toilet? Do you wait another week? Do you wait another 2 weeks? Or is it, if you're Islanders management, are you starting to plan for next year immediately?
I think they probably in the back of their minds are starting to plan for next year. What I think they're waiting on is when are the other teams going to strike for the to make the trades? Do they feel they need something now? The talk is in Vegas that they might need a goaltender because Robert Leonard is hurt and could miss the rest of the season. They might need to take a guy like Semyon Varlamov, not just for this year, but into next year because their depth behind Leonard is not the strongest. So I think once the calls start coming in, the Islanders should be open for business. And let's go through that list of what it could be. So Cal Clutterbuck, probably the top of the list. I think it's still 50-50 on Varlamov. I think it depends what's needed out there. And then you have the other guys who are restricted free agents. And I know their age is going to be, why would they do it? But there will be calls out there for Chara, for Zach Parise, and for Andy Green. The only problem that's going to be for Andy Green, he has made it very clear that he only wants to really play in the metropolitan area. So I don't know if he would accept he doesn't have a no trade clause, obviously. Mm-hmm. But I don't know if he would, if him and Lou Lamoriello had a discussion prior to him coming to the Islanders that if this was to happen, I don't know if he would be moved, let's say only if the Rangers call or if Pittsburgh calls. I don't know how limited he is in a trade. Yeah. So that's what we got to eye.
John, looking back, obviously with the opening road trip that was required, the slow start that they got off to at the new arena, COVID and everything else, you can point to all these things to say, just as Mike mentioned before, that you might just have to say and throw it in the hat and say this is not their year. But, it's revisionist history. But looking back, from the beginning of how this team was constituted, do you feel that they took a chance going with older guys and that hasn't panned out? Or is it just a matter of that they just never gelled properly no matter who was on the roster?
I think what really, if you had to summarize it simple, I think the salary cap did not go in favor of them because they had to trade Nick Leddy. And even people say, they made the mistake getting rid of Devon Tays. One, he did not really fit what Barry Trotz wanted to do. He's more of an offensive defenseman. That's why he's putting the numbers up in Colorado. There was just going to be no way to keep all these guys. So I think this year Lou Lamoriello did the best he could. But in some ways, what I've been thinking about the last couple of weeks, and I know it's a different sport, and I know this is a different situation. But no, I'll answer this question really quickly. There's no major shakeup in management. I think this is pretty much a retool. And Joe, this is where I'm going towards with that. Remember a couple of years ago, the Golden State Warriors had all those injuries. They won like 15 games the year of the COVID. And we were like, is it over for them? It wasn't. I ultimately think what happened with them is happening with the Islanders. They're getting exposed on the back end of their roster for weak depth because the Warriors, remember, when they had Durant and all those guys under max contract, they weren't able to bring a whole lot behind them. And that bench got exposed big time. The lack of depth in that organization. That's why, Mike, Trez, I know your guy Kenny Atkinson's on their staff now. He was brought in there for player development. And that's the way I think the Islanders are going. They need to restock some draft picks, let the younger guys play, and just rebuild, retool a little bit. I think they could get right back to where they were. As far as playoff position, I'm not concerned about that, but I think they need to retool the depth in the minor leagues because you saw some exposure there this year that they're just not quite there as far as a minor league talent pool, and they need to just really bring that back a little bit more.
Comment us, folks. We want your comments tonight. Johnny Sticks right now. Chris Caputo a little bit later on. Mike and I are going to squeeze some Knicks and Nets in the middle there after the break. John, I want to ask you about the Rangers. And now 3 in a row, 5 out of 7, 8 out of their last 11. Shesterkin playing absolutely out of his mind. 23-7 this year. Talk about how they've been playing during this streak. But also, I wanted to ask you before you do that about last night's game. I alluded to it when you first came on. Shesterkin had to leave that game with just a minute or two left after he got bowled over. They put him in a concussion protocol. He had to leave the game and actually came back in the shootout. And good thing he did. He faced 9 shots in the shootout and stopped 7 of them. So talk about him, and if you can, talk about how the Rangers have been playing lately.
I think the Rangers have bought into what Gerard Gallant wants to do. I think Igor Shesterkin is starting to really grow up. This is his first full season of 82 games because obviously a couple of years ago we know what happened. I think he's starting to really buy in and show his potential as being the number one. I think the young players are really starting to grow up. You're seeing a lot better offensive play, a lot more maturity, and I think that's going from the coaching staff overall. And I think what will happen at the end when this is all said and done, who knows? But you're certainly seeing progress from the Rangers, and I think a little earlier than they expected. But one thing you got to remember with them, you want to still focus on that young talent. You want to keep building this core up.
John, as Trez mentioned before, goaltending, and it's really in the playoffs, it's all about goaltending. You get the hot goalie and you can ride them forever. Would you say with the Rangers being, as young as they are, as long as they get that solid goaltending, that's enough to at least make them, contenders to go perhaps all the way?
I think it will be difficult. We got to see how the matchups unfold because, especially if you're in that 2-3, you end up with Washington, you end up with Pittsburgh. A little bit more experience on those. I know the Penguins haven't won a round in a couple of years, but they still have Crosby, still have Malkin. Tristan Jarry's playing just as well as Igor Shesterkin has played this year. So I still say it's luck of the draw. One thing I will say with the Rangers, they can't afford to go past 3. In the Eastern Conference, you don't want to end up playing one of those Atlantic teams. No,
because that's a beast right there. That in the playoffs, and you're 100% right. It's so deep, and when you have a team like Pittsburgh that is so dangerous and hasn't done much in the last couple of years and is hungry, it's going to be a challenge.
It's going to be a challenge from top to bottom within the East. Because think about it, Carolina's got upgraded their goaltending with Freddie Anderson. Rangers. Pittsburgh, we talked about them. Washington already has experience, even though they have not won a round since Trotz's Cup team. Then on the other side, you have pretty much Florida with Bobrovsky, one of the best in the game. Tampa Bay, the 2-time Stanley Cup champion. The only wild card factor in there, in my mind, is Toronto because they haven't won. And then Boston, yes, they're still experienced, but they have a young goaltender as well too. But they have more experience around the roster, so where they could possibly find a way to get away with it.
John, it's 17-20. It's probably, excuse me, hard to point to a lot of guys that have exceeded expectations coming into this season. But can you talk about a couple guys specifically on the Islanders that have perhaps exceeded beginning of the season expectations, and maybe 1 or 2 that haven't come up to what you expected from them?
Well, I think J.G. Pajot's played a very up and down season. He just hasn't looked like himself at times. I think Oliver Wahlstrom has taken some nice steps, shows you he can really be an every night player. Kyle Palmieri's been. I think overall we've seen a lot more inconsistency from the group, and then a couple injuries. Having Pulak out for 6 weeks was a tough break for the team this year. Simeon Varlamov not playing consistent as well too, and now he's in COVID protocol and can't come back because the team was up in Canada, so he'll be out at least through the end of the month. So it's just a lot of bad luck, and then a lot of poor play on the ice. And I think the COVID pause really hurt them, because nobody really was able to get into a routine on top. And I know you can tell October was so long ago. There was really no routine for them this year, and I think that really was a nail biter.
So let me ask you point blank, John. It's 17-20, losers of their last 3 out of 4. Today, on February 16th, are you ready to declare the New York Islanders done this season?
I would think so. I don't see anything else that's proven me otherwise. A miracle could happen in the month of March, but it's not going to be easy. They still have to go to California. They have a lot of games to make up. But looking at the rest of the beasts, as we say, the way the Eastern Conference is this year, it's going to be a challenge along the way. But I would entertain those calls if they start looking to make selling for sales.
I'm glad you said it, John. If you didn't, I was going to say it, but I don't want to be the bad guy.
I got to be the one lone voice here to keep my fingers crossed.
Get out of there.
But seriously though, look at what my comparison I made to, and look what the Warriors did. They traded some pieces. They got a couple of high draft picks. They got it. Yes, they didn't. James Wiseman hasn't been what he's been yet, but they have pieces there now, and that's what the Islanders need. So a couple of little comparisons there.
Yeah, no, that's good. The last thing I would just say to both of you guys is, look, as a lifelong Islander fan, we follow the team, John. This is a team that the last 2 years, made the conference finals. Was as close as you could be to playing for the cup. So from where we were to where we've been, we want to stay there. Obviously, I'm willing to make this little bump in the road, but Islander fans, let's just relax. Good things are still on the horizon.
Yeah, there are plenty of teams around the NHL who go to the playoffs for 2 years. You have to miss it for a year, because you know what? And Pittsburgh's another example. They're just exhausted. That's a long Stanley Cup playoff run.
John, I have one suggestion to you. Trade in that blue and orange for some red, white, and blue, and start following the New York Rangers.
No way.
We will talk to you in a couple weeks, John. Thanks very much, buddy.
All right, Mike.
Thanks, Johnny.
Have a great day. I think I ticked him off, Mike.
Trez, you hit him with a bomb on the way out.
Wow. I'm a bad guy. What can I say? You guys know that about me.
Listen, you're being a realist. I mean, listen, it is what it is. It's such a shame, though, and I know we're going to move on here in a second, but it's such a shame that you have such great will with the new building opening. The fans have been waiting for so long, and then the team kind of lays an egg this year. Again, I'm trying to be optimistic. The future is bright, but it would have been a great story had this team continued and really been, a serious cup contender instead of taking a step backward.
Yeah, it's not happening, Mike. Yeah. We're going to take a quick break, folks. We'll be right back after this with more on Spot on Sports.
Tyler Davis, tight end for the Green Bay Packers, and you're listening to Spot on Sports.
Now back to Spot on Sports with Mike Trez and Mike Godone.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Spot on Sports. Mike Trez, Mike Godone, and we are going to talk some basketball. Knicks and Nets squaring off tonight, Mike Godone. Both of these teams need this game, and unfortunately for both of them, only one of them can come away with a victory tonight. Have an update for me?
I certainly do. With 4:40 left in the second quarter, New York Knicks 56, Brooklyn Nets 33.
Wow.
Yes, 33. So
wow, that's got to soften the Islanders' goal for you a little bit. I'm thinking
a little bit, but listen, you look at the starting lineup here. You have Drummond's in. Having just come off that trade. We'll talk about that in a second. 3 points. Seth Curry 3 points. You know, but Blake Griffin leading the charge with 6 points off the bench. Just not, they're not the team that you're going to be expecting here in a couple of weeks. For the Knicks, Julius Randle, 14 points, off to a great start. Grimes in the starting lineup tonight, 8 points. My man Obi Toppin, 8 points in 6 minutes. Give that man some run. So
All
it's
let's dig into some specifics, Mike.
Sure.
25 and 33 for the Knicks, 12th place right now. They lost in OT to Oklahoma City on Monday. They are now 3 and 12, Mike, over their last 15. I asked you this on the last show. Let me ask you this again right now. Are the New York Knicks making the playoffs this year?
The New York Knicks are not making the playoffs.
Wow.
They're not, because
this has been a rough show. The Islanders are done. The Knicks are done. I mean, we have to call it the way it is, folks.
We do, and but I know I've always come down hard on the Nets, but that's a little bit more of an optimistic picture for sure as we get into that. But Mike, you know what? From the last couple of weeks to now, I used the same phrase back then, and it's still here. Identity. What is the identity of the New York Knicks? Last year, overachieving team based on what they had done in the past. Record was not that significantly higher than it is at the moment, but East was a little weaker. But they're defensive teams, scrappy, scoring. You had young players stepping up. Just all sorts of positives there. Thibodeau had them playing hard. There was no nonsense going on with Julius Randle was a good citizen, playing hungry. Now it's just like every guy is either underachieving or isn't happy, or there's some kind of drama, and the defensive setup that they were built for last year is nowhere to be found. And again, why, when you have a defensive-minded coach like Tom Thibodeau, who's so good at that part, to change up, the roster the way they did and not give him the pieces, I don't get it. I mean, I love him. Does he survive after this season? Does he want to survive after this season? Because they haven't given him anything to work with, and it's been a monumental disaster, unfortunately.
Yeah, you bring up what I think is a really good point, Mike, which is not just player-by-player specifics, but bigger picture thing. It just seems now more and more apparent when you look at the Knicks, not necessarily on the court, but as an organization, that there is some sort of split between Tom Thibodeau and Leon Rose and the other guys who acquire talent. It seems like the mandate was to become a little bit more offensive minded. To that end, they brought in guys like Kemba Walker, like Evan Fournier, about whom some of us got, a little bit excited. But it seemed, as you watch the season unfold, that Thibodeau didn't really want these guys. I mean, you look at a guy like Cam Reddish, right, who they went out and acquired mid-season. And basically, he sat there in mothballs for a month. Thibodeau never looked at him, and you said to yourself, "Well, wait a minute, what are we doing here? We're going out and getting guys and sort of shoving them up the nose of the head coach that he has no interest in playing." I mean, so let me ask you, Mike, as somebody who observes the Knicks kind of closely, is there a schism between Leon Rose and the guys in the upstairs and Tom Thibodeau? Do you feel that way?
It certainly seems that way, and is pointing that direction more and more as the season goes on. Because, again, you brought up Cam Reddish. Exactly. Why are you sitting this guy? What, listen, if that's your big,
want him.
Right. If that's your big acquisition for a year when you're struggling a little bit, that speaks volumes as well. But you know what? You brought the guy in, and his upside is huge. Everybody will agree on that. And he's not playing. So obviously, your coaching staff is not happy with that as well. I think one of the major issues that happened, and I'm not putting a lot of stock in what they were expecting from Kemba Walker. They were hoping for the best. Maybe they catch lightning in a bottle, whatever else. So he's had a couple of moments, but cranky knee, guy can't play as much. And it's just, he hasn't fit anything in the Tom Thibodeau system. So you take him out of the equation, but then Derrick Rose, who they've counted on in the past, he gets hurt. So you're talking about, a worst case scenario there. So then you go into guys that, we're not going to be counted upon to be in a starting role, or perhaps weren't ready yet, or whatever else. And again, I'm not here to be a Tom Thibodeau defender, but I will say this. Tom Thibodeau, his MO, he's a yeller. He demands. He's on the court. He's up their butts. He's constantly pointing stuff out. He'll get in guys' face. That's all well and good in professional basketball, as well as you're winning. And last year, that's what they needed. They needed that, but it lit a fire under some guys. This year, Julius Randle, hey man, he signed a contract. Does he want to get yelled at every day? Probably not. Kemba Walker saying and doing all the right things, but when he was benched, guys got pride, right? He went from being a starter to not even a rotation guy. So you got a lot of factors going on in that clubhouse and on that bench.
Why, in your view, Mike, as simply as you can possibly put it, did the Knicks sit on their hands at the trade deadline? Why?
The only thing I can think of is that what commodities do they have? And RJ Barrett is the one thing at the moment that they could possibly package to get something back, because Fournier, these are guys that maybe later on in the year, as it comes down, they buy him out and they go other places. But from a trade chip, I just don't think they had anybody that anybody was interested in other than RJ Barrett, and they're not getting rid of him, and rightfully so. People talked about Julius Randle. The guy's making huge money, and he's in the first year. What are they going to get for him? Who's going to take him?
That's what I was going to say, Mike. That's the move. That's the move that it seemed like the guys upstairs wanted to make, that Thibodeau, in my view, just as a casual observer, wouldn't let them make. Because as soon as you move Randall, this becomes, whether it's ready to be or not, RJ Barrett's team, and
right.
We clear space on the floor for your man, Obi Toppin, to finally get some run, and we see what we have to going in that direction. But first, in my view, Mike, we have to get Julius out of the way.
Yeah, and you know what? I joke about Obi Toppin because I like him as a complimentary piece, but I think he's showing he's not going to be an NBA starter, or can he be a contributor off the bench? Absolutely, but you do Thibodeau. If you get rid of Randall, what are you're basically sending up the white flag, because you're saying my season's over. We're going to play the kids. It's yet another rebuild, and he probably was like, you know what? I didn't sign on for that. And I'm a competitive guy, so I'm going to do the best I can here. Please, at least, let me see what I can do with this guy, and ride out the rest of the season and see where it goes. It's amazing, though, when we talk about New York Knicks basketball 1 year ago at this time, how the feelings were great, the excitement was there. Talking playoffs, heading in the right direction. There wasn't this. It's like, once again, there's a fog over Madison Square Garden. And they just can't get out of their own way.
Really quickly, Mike, because I want to get to Chris. The whole thing with the Harden trade, what was your view of the way that whole thing unfolded? Do the Nets look bad? Does Harden look bad? Does Philly look bad for wanting Harden? Does Simmons look bad for the way he forced himself out of Philadelphia? What exactly were your big takeaways from the way that whole thing shook out?
The NBA has turned into a league where players can make the biggest mess and don't have to clean it up. It's like it's like a kindergarten kid who plays with blocks and just moves on to something else. They have no accountability for anything. They don't have to clean up there. James Harden, he of the mysterious hamstring. Every time he wants to go someplace else, his hamstring hurt. His knee hurts. Something comes up, and then all of a sudden, whoa! Although he's not playing right now with the Sixers,
out to the All-Star break.
Yeah, exactly. But I will say this: you had sent me a message prior to the trade saying, "Would you do this Simmons for Harden trade?" And I was not for it. However, I did not know at the time that the Nets would be getting picks, would be getting a Seth Curry, would be getting an Andre Drummond. So now while tonight these guys are not doing the job, they're not there to do what they're being asked to do this week. When you get those picks and Ben Simmons, to me, no brainer for the Nets. I think it was a huge deal for them. For the 76ers, I think they gave up way too much to get James Harden. But you know what? They were in a no-win situation. They waited so long and had other deals in place. And of course, looks like they wanted that star power in James Harden, but he better pan out. And if not, they're going to be in trouble for a long time.
Notice how nicely he puts this, folks. I was not in favor of it. Don't worry, Mike. I am not going to tell the audience how you busted my chops and what you said about Harden and all these other folks.
Don't you dare show your phone of the text messages I had. I'll lose all credibility.
All right, let's move away from that. At this point in time, we're going to bring in our Mets beat reporter and also our MLB insider, Cappy. Chris Caputo is back with us on the show. Hey, Chris, how are you, buddy?
Good. How's it going, guys?
What's up, Cap?
Great to see you.
Doing all right. We got all the sports out of the way so we could talk about the lockout, huh?
Yeah, unfortunately, Chris, right now we are in a place in New York sports where the Giants and Jets were absolutely unwatchable this year. The Jets we expected, the Giants we really didn't. The Islanders people expected big things from, and they're in the tank. The Knicks people didn't expect to take this big a step back. I mean, right now we're basically down to the Rangers and then possibly the revival of the Nets, and then sitting on our hands waiting for baseball. So that's where you come in, Chris. What can you tell us?
Well, I mean, we're hitting about maybe 75 days now of this lockout that they were saying, hey, no big deal. And I kind of said to you, Mike, I thought this was going to last and it'd be a delay to the season because I just think there's too many issues. And they started this about a year ago talking, and there's just too many loopholes and people don't want to give up money. I think the things that they've agreed upon, universal DH, which I'm sure some teams will be real happy to get their pitchers out of the way and guys who are sitting on the bench, the Dom Smiths of the world can actually get in a game. You can trade J.D. Davis to some guy who needs a corner infielder, maybe the Blue Jays, and the Mets can pick up somebody. They're going to have some type of draft lottery. They haven't said exactly how, but teams who don't make the playoffs, either 3 to 8 teams will have a chance to win that top pick. And then they're eliminating draft pick compensation, meaning you can go sign with another team and you're not going to lose a draft pick. All right, so we've agreed on 3 things. But here we are. I would say there's got to be a hard deadline of maybe February 28th, March 3rd at the latest. So we're looking at a week to 2 weeks where the season would not start on time.
Chris, you know what? With this Major League Baseball scenario, as you really, you hit it on the head with the 3 things they agree on, but there's so many other things. Baseball has just always found a way to shoot itself in the foot over the years. It gets back on track, then there's a labor stoppage. It gets back on track, then you have, a steroid scandal, all sorts of things. You're coming off of COVID, where finally you're talking about some goodwill, getting people back in the seats, almost back to normal. And now this. Can baseball, it always survives, but is this something that can set baseball back for quite a while, in your opinion?
Yeah, people said that steroids kind of brought people back. You had 94 and people were upset, and you lost some people and they came back. I think it's bad timing for baseball because the other sports are not really up, and I think this is the chance for baseball to shine, get people back in the seats. Absolutely. Now, how many people want to go to 162 games? I don't know. I think they could possibly use this time to tail back things a little bit and maybe change baseball. Do I want to see 30 doubleheaders? No, I think that's too much. Can they get rid of some of those doubleheader rules? I don't want to see the 7 innings. I don't want to see the, all those back-to-back things. But, there's a lot of teams that are going to be losing out on this. But I think, what it really comes down to is there's a lot of low-level teams that don't want to spend the money, and some of the other guys do. And it's where do you put that cap in? The baseball players have given in. Gone to a higher, as far as playoffs, they've gone, 12 teams. they want to see them go up to, I believe they're asking for 14 teams. They ask them to put advertising on their uniforms. The players have given in. But the main thing is they want to have these guys be able to be arbitration eligible after like 2 years. Major League Baseball saying no, 3 to 6 years, you got to be kind of in control. They want these guys making more money at 2-3 years in. Major League Baseball saying no, we got to put that cap in there. So it's about kind of controlling the young stars. And that's why Juan Soto at this point, you probably read some things, he's going to keep turning down the offers from the Nationals because he wants to go year by year to see if these things are going to get better.
It's actually a very smart move by him.
Yeah. Well, he wants to go to the Mets.
So when you remove some of these obstacles, Chris, like you mentioned, the universal DH we agree to, some of these issues about different rules that have been implemented recently that could be taken back out. I mean, when you remove those obstacles, this is really, at its essence, a squabble about money. And that's a really, really bad look. I mean, Coach Mike mentioned it. I'll piggyback onto that point. In this era of COVID, where people are really hurting, Chris, they have lost their jobs, they have lost their health, they have lost their homes, they've lost family members. I mean, for billionaire owners and multimillionaire players to be squabbling over money and not starting their season on time is a terrible, terrible look right now. Do they not realize that, or do they just not care?
I think they're trying to probably look longer term as to how much money. There's a lot of teams who they own their own sports network. And like SNY, what are they showing right now? They want to show, guys dating girls and trying to get on. And are they showing UConn women's basketball, replays? Like, you can't do that forever. At some point, they've got to step up and say, hey, we need to get this going. I wonder how much guys like Steve Cohen have in that room, being a new guy, and he's got the money and he's willing to spend it. Whereas some of these Pittsburgh Pirates, Kansas City Royals guys are saying, I don't want to spend my money. I don't want to raise the salary cap. But honestly, guys, it's basically a couple of things. It's a competitive balance tax threshold where they're basically saying we don't want to, raise the bar at the bottom. And pre-arbitration bonus pool, which is like, hey, here's a bunch of money before you can become big, and we don't want to give that to you. So I think you're right, Mike. It's about money. They're going to lose people. They're definitely going to lose people. And here's the thing. How many kids 10 years old are really talking about baseball? They come in, they're talking Long Island. They might talk hockey. They might talk soccer. But for the most part, they're talking football. They'll go play with their friends, and you're going to hear some basketball talk. But they are not sitting there for baseball. And they have to, they have to shorten these games. You got to find any way. I don't even care if they make the game 7 innings instead of 9. But in reality, you really just have to shorten the game. You got to get their attention span. But I just don't like all the extra things that they're putting behind it. Spring training, okay, fine. What's it really going to take? Players need 4 weeks. So if they can get something going, you got to add on minimum 4 weeks. But here's the problem with that. Guys, even if they do get something going, you are one injury away from losing a third of the season.
Absolutely. Cap, you brought up all these great points about the ins and outs of what the two sides are kind of agreeing on and disagreeing on. Being that the clock is ticking, can you see them agreeing to something kind of like a stopgap to get this year going, or is it all or nothing?
I think they're so far apart, and there is no timeline for them to meet right now. So it's not like basically they said, we're having a big meeting Saturday. They sat down for 1 hour, and the baseball union, the union basically laughed at the owners and walked away. They haven't even responded. What's a mediator? Like what's that guy really do? There's no need for a mediator. These guys are so far apart.
Yeah, there's nothing to mediate.
And I'm sick of hearing the Max Scherzers who are making $43 million step up and say something. I want to hear the guy who's been around for 5-6 years and is making $2-3 million. I want to hear what he has to say. But I think they're so far apart, Mike, that we're looking at a max 140 game season, and that's with doubleheaders.
Wow. So if I could ask you, Chris, to put a number on it from 1 to 10, the likelihood that this Major League Baseball season starts on time. 10 being, yes, it's going to start on time. 1 being absolutely no shot. What would your number be that you would give us?
If I said 2, I'd be lying to you. It's probably a 1.
Wow.
Because you got to give yourself 4 weeks, and we're already at, late February. So I would say the latest it would have to be would be March 1st, which, we're looking at next week, basically, 2 weeks. So I think that we're looking at some type of stoppage. Now, here's my biggest thing, guys. Do we just start throwing doubleheaders on? Or let's say we get this season started April 21st. Do we scrap the whole schedule and throw it out? Or do we just say, hey, we're going to cut off some games, try and make them up on off days? Because you got teams that are scheduling, retirement ceremonies for August 18th, and people are paying $120 a ticket. Are they going to redo the whole schedule? I don't know. I honestly think, number one, they're not going to start on time. And number two, I think they're going to lose more than 20 games. I don't think the season starts until late April.
Wow. All right, Chris. We're going to let you run and put the kids to bed. Great to hear from you. We'll follow this story. I know you'll be following it, and we'll talk to you in a couple weeks. All right?
Thanks,
All right.
Cap. Keep
All
the
right,
faith,
Mike.
buddy.
Good
All
luck
right,
and good luck on number 51, Mike, next week.
Much appreciated, my friend. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. All right, Mike. So, listen, this is a tough time in New York sports, man. I mean, the Knicks are down from where we thought they were going to be. The Nets, who thought they would be in a logistical mess like they've been. The Islanders have taken a really, really huge step back. It's been painful to watch. The Giants were a disaster. Now they're being sued. I mean, I don't know, Mike.
That's quieted down a little bit. I mean, of course, it's gonna continue, but like anything, it was a hot story. But you got to still pay attention to it. But I'm hoping we're turning the corner here, Trez.
Yeah, it's been a tough time in New York sports, folks. So I think what we're going to need to do, Mike, over the next couple of weeks, we're going to have to put the Rangers front and center.
They deserve it.
Yeah, I mean, listen, they've been a nice surprise. They've given MSG a boost. They've given sports in this area a boost. So they've probably been, for the first year or so we were on the air together, the team that we really talked about the least in this area. Only because last year they weren't good. They had that craziness at the end of the season of getting smacked around physically on the ice, and then their leadership team getting smacked around and smacked out the door. So, but they've been a great story this year. So I think what we're going to have to do is give them a little bit more play as the weeks go on.
Well, listen, as I said, they deserve it. They're not going anyplace. The Islanders were supposed to be the feel-good story, but as a New York sports fan, we always say, "Oh, you can't root for both. You got to pick one, whatever else." That's all well and good, but for the purposes of this show, and anybody who really, is a sports fan and likes it, anytime any New York team is doing well, it's good for sports. It's good for us, and it gives us again, something to feel good about. And while we bring up the Islanders a lot. Much of our audience is Ranger fans, and rightfully so. It's your time, guys.
Absolutely. So that's going to do it, folks, for us here on Spot on Sports. We want to thank Johnny Sticks for coming on with us. We want to thank Chris Caputo for coming on with us. And our producer engineer is the great Michael Anthony. Our theme music is by Mr. Scott Daly. Logo art by Valerie Hanatic, the Jets fanatic. Our voiceover guys, the amazing Archie Snowden. For everybody here at Spot on Sports, including Mike Godone, the coach, this is Mike Trez saying so long. We'll see you next time on Spot on Sports.
Whatever.